Welcome back to Album Coverage, where we run through a recording artist's back catalog, cover by cover. Today we're looking at California-based schmaltz-peddling sibling duo, the Carpenters, Richard and Karen Carpenter, of course, whose career starts back in the 1960s and goes until Karen's untimely death. However, there was quite a bit of material released posthumously, a bit of which I will look at. I mean, they've probably had about 7,000 compilations released, and I'm not going to look at all of those. Only one or two compilations make it, and I'll mention it when they come up and why I've included it. Now, of course, I don't know if you know, but they started as a jazz band, the Richard Carpenter Trio, and Karen was on drums. And it was a process of getting them to be a duo with Karen as a lead singer. Their first album released under that guise was called Offering, or at least it was briefly called Offering. This is the album cover of it here, and it's fascinatingly bizarre. Karen is dressed like a nun, carrying a bunch of sunflowers, and Richard is dressed nicely also, I suppose, and they were just walking up the steps to go into the woods, but they were interrupted by the photographer who said, "Hey," and they turned around and they took this snap. And this very clearly religious-looking album, the contents of which were not, A&M probably decided, well, that's not going to sell anything. What we need is the pair of them on a boat as if they were the Beach Boys. So it came out again as Ticket to Ride, which was, the Beatles song, and they covered it. Very, very black cover. I described the Carpenters as schmaltz in this introduction, but I don't believe that at all. I'm always in love with how very dark some of their best moments are. And Ticket to Ride is one of those. It definitely doesn't befit an album cover of them smiling on a ship at sea, a yacht, but, that's what you get. Now, here's Close to You, where they look for all the world. If you're a brother and sister and you've got to be doing these album covers, you see a man and a woman smiling together who are approximately the same age, and you tend to think, oh, they must be a couple, even though they've got the same damn smile and the same damn face. You have very different hair here. And then when you realize that they're brother and sister, it kind of creeps you out. But the fact is that, you just creeped yourself out, really, because you're the one who interpreted it as something other than siblings. All this is two people smiling. And yeah, she's wearing white, but they're on rocks somewhere. Could be a family vacation photo, except you don't really dress like that when you're on vacation, do you? And so maybe the Carpenters realized that, because for a while we start to get album covers like this one. This is the Carpenters. And that's what's on the album cover. Their logo, because now they've got a logo, and nothing else. The Carpenters were trying to turn into Chicago at this point, except even more bland. You'll see, there's three album covers that are pretty much the same thing. And this is Brown on Beige. That's what the album should be known as, but it's not. And here's A Song for You. This has got an album title, and it's printed at the top, A Song for You, but still it's just the logo in red, black on red this time, with a heart beneath it, like a candy heart. And then 1973 is Now and Then. That's a bit of a deviation. They are actually on the cover, on the inside of their... I wish I was one of those car people who could say, oh, this is an AMC blah, blah, blah from 1968 or whatever, and know that stuff. But I don't know. It's an orange car, and they're inside it in front of a very suburban house. Very probably theirs when they were a kid or something like that. I don't know. Did I mention they're from California? Because they are. Well, Connecticut and then California, as so happens. And that's this album cover, and it's a bit of a deviation before we're back to that. Remember brown on beige? Well, now we've got beige on brown. Their first compilation album sold about 20,000 billion copies. I presume it did anyway, because, my parents had them. So that must mean something. And it's the same as that other album cover, just in photo negative. And here they are live in Japan. And this came out in Japan because that's where it was recorded. And they seem to be ignoring each other. Richard at his piano and Karen at her microphone. But it's a live image. It's an image of them live performing. And the logo's there. Horizon in 1975, and I got to give it to them for this album cover. This is pretty unexpected. It doesn't have the logo or the name of the album. It's, just like Rolling Stones albums in the 1960s and Pink Floyd albums in the 1970s. It just does not have any information on the cover. But unlike those with, cows and stuff like that, this just has Karen and Richard. And it's intentionally soft focus, kind of got that Vaseline thing happening. They're both wearing white. They both seem very grim, vaguely out of it, and they're standing in front of a tree. Um, for some reason, I like this album cover. I like that it is so very empty. I mean, nowhere near as empty as that series that I just spoke about. It's definitely got something to look at, but they have empty expressions on their face, and the lack of any information on the cover. I just think it's pretty cool. Even though we see more of Richard Carpenter's chest hair than I had perhaps ever hoped to see, but maybe some people are into that. And then they go this way, a kind of hush. See, I love the Carpenters, but when they were cheesy, God, were they cheesy. This is a window that's all fogged up because it's winter, even though this came out in June. And they are smiling, over smiling, like they're at a Sears portrait studio, through this fogged up window on which somebody has written the band name. Sorry, not the band name, the album name. Because you do, right? You go, and you fog it up, and then you write your name with your finger, or you write something with your finger, or maybe you write the name of the album that you're about to release. And if all that's not cheesy enough, you got some sun and trees that are etching out parts of their head. And I don't like it. It's ew. It's Loretta Lynn and I don't know, insert country singer, male country singer here. This is so Grand Ole Opry. But it's not. It's live at the Palladium, and we are to believe that a really giant scaffolding with really, really giant lettering was erected to write Carpenters live at the Palladium, over which they have that damn over smile again and a kind of showbiz posture as they stand in front of the giant scaffolding. But Passage, aka the Carpenters Go Experimental. And they've thrown that logo out the window, and they've got a different kind of logo. Well, at least their name kind of scrawled to give this flowing idea that we're starting with just simple piano notes. Well, I shouldn't say piano. That's just because Richard plays the piano. That's why I said that. Simple written musical notes that then get all watercolory and fly off the staff. A passage from stead, simple piano music to something more exotic and experimental. But, this is the Carpenters we're talking about. So, don't expect too much. Norman Rockwell, yeah. I mean, okay, I'm sure it was a really big deal. Oh, it's not Norman Rockwell. There's a name written on it. Robert something. Tannenbaum. Robert Tannenbaum, because, Christmas and O Tannenbaum. So it's just a Norman Rockwell clone then. It's Santa Claus, and he's drawing Richard and Karen, and they're smiling again like at the Sears portrait studio, and there's an elf that's holding Santa's paints. Oh, And I don't like this. I don't like this one bit. This is incidentally not the album that came out in 1978. You can see how it says 70 continuous minutes of the season's best with Karen and Richard. 11 performances heard here for the first time. So this was like a reissue that came out in the CD era. And, shame on me for being so inauthentic, but I don't really care. The whole thing looks like a cover of the Saturday Evening Post. Because I would bet that there was a giant overlap between Saturday Evening Post readers and Carpenters listeners. Yeah, made in America. I mean, why were they going to be so retro? They weren't especially a retro act, Why were they going for this kind of, life was better in the 1960s and the 1950s when everything was airbrushed and everybody was really white? Why did it serve them in 1981 to put out album covers like this, especially when poor Karen was on death's door? Sorry to be so dramatic. It's just the band is a lot better than their album covers are. 1983, this is posthumous. So the story's just gotten sad, and it's just Karen on the album cover here. Voice of the Heart. I believe that this was partially designed to be Karen's debut solo album. But it was kind of mixed together with other material and then just became a Carpenters album. And, knowing the way that she died, it's easy to look at this cover and spend too much time analyzing the body fat percentage of her face and making it tragic where it probably wouldn't be seen as a tragic album cover in other circumstances. But then again, that's what I do, just the same as you do, and everybody does when looking at this album cover. So, poor Karen. 1987, Richard put out an album cover where he was still committed to saying, "I'm just the same Bobby Soxon Letterman 1965 kind of high school guy I ever was. I'm in front of an old car, and the album is called Time, or T.I.M.E. Who wants a Richard Carpenter album? He's Art Garfunkel. He's John Oates. Nobody, that's who. Love Lines. Okay. It's an interesting photo, but, that's a nice watch anyway. And she's on his shoulders, and he's gazing over in this direction, and like so many of their photographs, I can just hear the photographer giving directions to them. Okay, now I want you to gaze over on this side. Yep, look over there. And yeah, put your arm down a little bit lower there, Karen. And that's it. Love Lines. Did I mention that's what this is called? Because it is. Now, here's that solo debut that, Karen died before being able to complete. But when did that ever stop anybody? And to the credit of Carpenters Incorporated, they don't try to make it look like a Carpenters album in all but name. That's clearly Karen Carpenter, and her name is written there, but Carpenter was her name, so you can't fault her for that. But it doesn't really have a Carpenter's look to it. It would have been an interesting album. I presume that this was a mock-up from the early 80s, because it doesn't look like anything that would have come out in 1996, which is when this was finally released. So I imagine there's some authenticity to this album cover that it was what was originally designed. And she is leaning on something, a table, and she might be in front of a sofa or something like that, and it's almost monochromatic, except for her face, which has got hues of orange or whatever in it, because it's like a photograph that's been sketched on, so part photograph, part not. Here's another Richard Carpenter album of him in front of a piano, a grand piano with the top open so you can see the guts of the piano. He ain't playing it. He's just got his arm on it, and he's looking off in that same direction that he was looking off in an album or two ago. And in fact, with the same watch. Ain't that weird? Pianist, arranger, composer, conductor. That's what it's called, because, that's what he was. He's not dead. And then 2001 is Time Goes By. Oh, was this a posed photograph? It must have been. Karen wouldn't be sleeping without her seatbelt on while driving down the road, and where would the cameraman be? But it was an interesting idea for an album cover. Richard is driving the car and Karen is sleeping. And this is called As Time Goes By. And I could almost see this as a real album cover from back when the Carpenters were alive, were a going phenomenon. Um, and I would have liked it, had it come out in 1974 or something. I'd have liked the kind of off the cuff feel to it. I mean, it is very clearly staged, but you can let yourself pretend that it's not. Um, yeah, I don't have much more to say about it than that. And in fact, because that's the most recent posthumous unreleased material, so this is different from the 7,000 different reissues that I haven't bothered to mention. The Carpenters had a Greatest Hits Part 2 that came out in their lifetime. I don't know why I didn't include that. Instead of just saying why didn't I include it, I should probably just go back and edit this and put it in. You know what? I will. I don't know what year it came out, but here it is. Yep, there it is. That's their second album, the Greatest Hits album cover, the one that goes alongside Brown on Beige on Brown, the first one. Anyway, goodbye.